Welcome back, everyone, to the next installment of Replay Rush, where we bring you exciting matchups from some of the best players in StarCraft II. This week's match is a quarterfinal Zerg versus Protoss from the OlimoLeague number 208. Spawning in the top right of Pillars of Gold, our blue Zerg player. For Jin Green Wings, this is Rogue. And spawning in the bottom left, our red Protoss player. For the Afrika Freaks, this is Stats. A ZVP from the OlimoLeague, one of the community's top events, maintained and sponsored by some wonderful people. And of course, we always get to see some of the best Koreans take battle in the OlimoLeague, and this is going to be no exception here for the OlimoLeague number 208, this best of three between these two. Of course, very storied players in StarCraft II history, both Rogue and Stats finding themselves at the pinnacles of StarCraft II success. Rogue, former BlizzCon champion, GSL champion, Stats, almost BlizzCon champion, many GSL victories under his belt. Both players have been able to climb the great mountain of StarCraft II history and will find themselves amongst the Hall of Fame if one ever should be officially created. But of course, both players still continuing to play in great form, finding themselves in the top 10 of all players in StarCraft II, as it currently labeled in OlimoLeague. And as of late in the ZVP matchup, both players having a lot of great form, taking off great series against opponents in their realm. Of course, Rogue, as of late, taking ZVP victories over Zest, Zaun, Creator, Prince, Hurricane, and Stats finding his own success against opponents like Solar, Armani, and Dongray Gu, to name a few. So right now, Stats already getting a jump start on his opponent. Of course, Stats known for being very tricky and aggressive, and already does so by blocking Rogue's natural expand here in game number 1 of this best of 3. Rogue going to delay his natural by a decent amount, only now getting out to it here at the 2-minute and 50-second mark, which has set up Stats for a bit of a timing here with a Twilight Council. Now, this is a very popular build for quite some time now, for many months, to get rushed out into Glaive Adepts. Now, I feel like Rogue and other very prominent Zerg players have done their part to put together a good defense, getting a Roach Warren out at a respectable time, building up that Queen count to be able to get aggressive against a Warp Prism. But Protoss players can still hit a very strong timing with this particular build. So being able to find damage is not going to be too tall of a task for our red Protoss player. And it looks like he is going to double down into that particular build order, getting that resonating glaive upgrade, and also throwing down not 2 but 3 extra gateways. So 4 gateway pressure with a Warp Prism coming out. Now, Rogue's going to do everything he can to try and be prepared for this potential engagement. He hasn't quite seen what he needs, is able to see the second gateway at the wall, but that doesn't really tell him as much as he would like. Now, he's done a really nice job here of setting up these Zerglings to be able to intercept a pathway for this Warp Prism. But it looks like Stats is going to try and get on top of that vision early. The Warp Prism is going to come out, but these Zerglings are not going to be able to spot it just yet, so that Warp Prism should be able to come across the map. Now, if you're Rogue, what does Rogue respond with? It feels like he is responding to additional pressure coming across the map, getting a little extra supply cap in those Overlords so he can immediately crank out those Roaches. And it looks like Stats is going to start posting up and getting ready for this engagement. But already back behind, getting ready for a bit of a transition here as the Dark Shrine is already coming out. But Stats has shown up. He's ready to go. What does Rogue have to say to this aggression? The Queens are going to try and push away the first Adept Shade, but they're not going to be able to follow up into the main base just yet. But Roach's going to try and get on top of these Adepts. Adepts are going to try and sneak on through. There's another warp in already happening at the front of the natural. And now Stats is going to try and attack in multiple locations here, getting on top of multiple mineral lines. 7 workers have gone down so far and more on the way. But here's an interesting factoid. Stats doesn't have any more Adepts to warp in right now. So Rogue going to try and take that opportunity. He's concerned. Is my opponent trying to macro up? No, he's not. Overlords are going to spot the second warp in of these Adepts, and Stats is going to try and push on forward once again. Now, these Adepts are actually not going to finish their shade up into the main. A little bit of cute micro to clean off the rest of those Zerglings. Rogue trying to shove Stats out and away. He's going to drone up behind this and immediately start his lair tech as well. But, oh, that's going to be a bad decision here. 4 DTs going to get added into the mix in this Warp Prism. Now, there are Queens ready to go, but will this be enough? Those Dark Templar are going to get dropped off. Does this get to escape? It does not, but these Queens are automatically under fire. This is the only piece of vision that Rogue has right now. Lair Tech is not quite done. So now these workers are going to have to be pulled off of the mineral line. These Dark Templar are allowed to run free. 16 workers have gone down, though, because the third base mineral line was completely left exposed. And as the DTs are going to be warped back home, the economic damage has been done. 20 workers killed off for the cost of 8 Adepts. That is terrible, terrible damage. If we look at the income advantage of Stats, he is just secured such a nice, strong spike, not once, but twice in this game. So if you're Rogue, what do you try to do to transition behind this? Your economy isn't in shambles, but it's not in a great spot. So many resources being invested into that drone count, which could be put into army, but instead going to get a Spire, trying to get Glial Reconstitution, that Roach speed. Stats already out to his third base as well at the Nexus. And Rogue is kind of caught in an awkward position. He's not able to build up his army force. He's not able to have what he needs to be able to push off these Archons right away. So he's going to have to fight with the little forces that he has. And these Queens are getting dangerously low. Ooh, 1 Queen almost falling here with just a little bit of health left. Stat's going to try and shade on in, and immediately the third base gets pulled. Rogue knows he can't afford to throw away any more workers. Has to be overly cautious. Stats, on the other hand, has just been building up exactly the army composition that he wants. Nice ground force here. Adepts, Stalkers, Sentries, Immortals. He's got it all. And it appears as if Stats is going to meet up with his Archons as well. Charge is just about completed. +1, halfway complete as well. And Stats is going to be able to shove on forward here and continue his aggression once more. Now Rogue going to try and move a Spore Crawler in here. That's going to help with the air control of Rogue, not allowing that Warp Prism to be able to roam freely, but unfortunately that's immediately going to get picked off here. Some great force fields will be able to zone out more of the units. A second Spore Crawler trying to get into place, but not going to be able to root itself down. Workers falling in the mineral line here at the third base. Mutas will be able to clean this up, but again, this is continued damage that Rogue is just having a difficult time dealing with here. Stats unable to feel the pain of these Mutas. Muta's going to try and get on top of the Warp Prism, but those are not going to be able to connect. GG's going to be called, and Stats, controlling the tempo in game number 1, overwhelms his opponent and walks away with a game 1 victory. As we jump into game number 2, we'll have to see how our two opponents move forward in this series. Of course, Stats spawning in the top right, up 1-0 over his opponent Rogue in the bottom left of Juggernaut. We'll have to see if Stats can continue to control the pace of his opponent. One thing that professional players and players alike in StarCraft II find success in being able to control the flow of the game for your opponent, not allowing your opponent to take the timings that they want. Maybe it's delayed hatchery, maybe it's delayed tech. In this case, once again, Stat's going to get on top of the natural base expansion and force Rogue out to that third base location. Now, on a wide map like Juggernaut, it is such a long distance from the main to the third base location. So already going to force his opponent to not be as efficient with his mining. His economy is not going to take off as quickly as it might otherwise want to. And that's exactly the soft kind of damage that Stats wants to cause in this matchup against an opponent who Rogue would feel very comfortable being able to take this to a late game, being able to get lurkers, getting out his late game army, and just overwhelming his opponent. And on a map such as this, that has so many of these bases split off between both of these players, Rogue could very easily find himself a large amount of space to get his economy rolling and build the army of his desire. Especially since there are so many different attack paths. Of course, Juggernaut, very, very commonly referred to as a Zerg favored map for all of the different bases, for all of the different attack paths, and these acceleration zones, adding a lot of value to the army composition of the Zerg player. So Stat's going to do everything he can to try and keep Rogue on the back foot once again, opening with an Adept coming out. This probe going to try to be annoying once again and delay as much as possible and to figure out what kind of information he can possibly gain from his opponent. Once again, Rogue's going to have to invest into the shooing of this probe, but not going to be too big of a task. Rogue going to work on getting out to his third base as well. And once again, Stat's going to open up with a Twilight Council. We could possibly see a rush into Resonating Glaives once again. Stats has already shown us that he is willing to get extra creative as he has in the past. One thing that Rogue does not have very good access to is information. He is going to try and get a Zergling up into the main, not going to be able to find the information he wants, and the Overlord is pinned off into the left. So now that Overlord is going to have to try and fly in to a risky path just to grab information. There's no information Overlord on the bottom right-hand side. It looks like it is going to be a Dark Shrine once again. Now, Rogue desperate for that information. He's got speed, Lings completed, working on trying to get into the main base to see what he can spot. And honestly, if he can get onto that ramp, the Dark Shrine is going to be extra visible. So now this doesn't necessarily indicate that there's going to be added pressure coming out right now. Only 2 gateways on the way, so 3 gate pressure instead of 4. This can very easily lead us into an Archon style situation rather than just a full rush into those DTs as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on what's going to come out here. But the War Prism is going to finish up, and once again, Rogue's going to try and gather as much information as he possibly can off of his opponent, putting these Zerglings into the path of the Warp Prism, and will be able to spot it this time and has a little bit better information than he did in game number 1. Now, immediately as a response, Spore Crawlers are going to be coming down to potentially deal with really any kind of aggression. Great against Oracles, great against Void Rays, great against Warp Prism harassment, and especially good against a Warpin of Dark Templar. Now, the scary part here is that everything is going to come to a head here. But as I say that, he will be able to get on top of this. Does lose 1 queen. 1 queen going to go down, 3 drones getting picked off. All in all, a much better defense than he had in game number 1. Not a full protection, but at least he's going to be able to provide pressure out across the map. these Zerglings going to get across to really put on the heat against Stats, who only has a couple of adepts here at that third base location. This has the potential to be canceled, especially since the shield battery is not quite finished. One Warpin going to try and add a little bit of extra value to this, and it is a Warpin of a Dark Templar. So ideally, Rogue does not want to stay around. He's just going to lose all of those Zerglings and potentially at no major damage to the Nexus. So instead, he is going to harass that third base location and actually does try to wiggle his way in here. This is a decent amount of damage, but can he protect against the Archons back at home? The Queens have been pulled up into the main base. Roaches are already on the field, so this should get shoved back and away. Rogue going to try and get as much damage done as he possibly can, being able to defend back at home and put on some pressure at the bases of Stats. So Stats doing his best to juggle here. Now information is going to be crucial for both players as the creep spread is going to be dealt with here for Rogue, but Rogue in a much better position as he sits up 100 supply to his opponent's 80. A little bit of a supply block, though, losing some of those crucial overlords. At this point, Rogue really doesn't have a whole lot of ceiling to grow, so he's going to have to invest a lot of his mineral count into getting more of these overlords so he can continue to get his roach swell going here. Glial Reconstitution on the map. There is no +1 missile, and we're not seeing any major jump into mutas just yet. Now, Rogue has been saving up his gas, though. He has enough to really invest if he wants to, and 7 mutas going to be coming out as well. So a little bit of roach, a little bit of muta. He's going to try and have it all to be able to provide a decent amount of pressure against his opponent in Stats. Now, mutas are going to be great at zoning out the Warp Prism. The Warp Prism is not going to have nearly as much value with those mutas on the field. 9, in fact, also on the way, dumping in a little bit more of that gas. +1 flyer attack coming in as well for Rogue. But this is a rather scary army here for Stats, and he's kind of cornered off his opponent in Rogue. Some great force fields going to pick off these roaches. And now Rogue is really kind of in an awkward position here. That was a big chunk of the sturdy part of his army, and it's now mostly Zerglings and a handful of roaches. This wall will not hold, and Zerglings are immediately going to come pouring on in. Cybernetics Core is going to be in danger, but right now, Rogue does not have a big answer for what's coming back at home. All of the Immortals, the Zealots, the Stalkers coming to deal major critical damage here to Rogue, and again, there isn't a whole lot to deal with this. But right now, Stats has to find a way to deal with the damage back at home. Stalker Warpins will help out, and that does flush Rogue out of his main base. Oh, that hatchery is so low, and it is going to fall, losing the natural hatchery. It is a bit of a rough spot. Those mutas do make it all the way back home, and most of the units are going to get recalled back. Holy cow, what a great exchange here for our blue Protoss player. Of course, taking a look at the units lost tab shows a major advantage here for Stats, but Rogue is not quite done. He has the mobility of this Zergling and Muta force, but in taking an engagement right here is not the greatest option, especially when you're up against 3 Archons and a Stalker. Zarkon's doing a pretty decent amount of damage, but a lot of the Mutalisk will be able to fly on as they are going to try and dive on into the natural expand once again. This Warp Prism going to try and ferry a couple of these Archons back at home, but it's going to come at the cost of pretty decent damage here. 13 probes going to go down, but once again, Stats is going to move across with this bulky army and look at Rogue and say, I don't think you have anything on the ground to stop this. If your mutas are going to go deal damage on my side of the map, fine. I'll just take another hatchery and leave you even further high and dry. But this time, not going to get all the damage he's looking for. Some great splits on these mutas, trying to mitigate the damage from these Archons. And now that with the Archons added into the mix, that should empower Stats to stick around here. Nice big warpin of these Stalkers, and the 4th base is going to fall. That's a huge amount of damage here against Rogue, who is trying to secure himself. But Stats is on 39 workers. This is kind of a do or die moment for our blue Protoss player. This is now economic damage that Stats has been looking for here, picking off 20 drones the units of Rogue trying to move across the map. This is a very do or die moment. Gonna try and get on top of the Dark Shrine, but I'm afraid that this is just going to be too much here. The natural base is going to fall once again. The Dark Shrine, it does go down, but at what cost? Stats able to flex the army composition difference here. It's very, very close on those army counts, though. 84 to 78. This just looks so good in Stats' favor, though, as he is able to engage against this bulky army. And with some solid warp-ins here, will be able to try and hold it down. Now, that battery overcharge is going to try and get as much damage as possible, but those Archons getting on top of all of those Mutas. The Mutas softened up and completely chewed apart here. And Stats exercising the power of Protoss against his red opponent, taking a 2-0 win in this quarterfinals best of 3 series. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to another installment of Replay Rush, brought to you by Alpha X. My name is Rushy. If you enjoyed my cast, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, and of course, follow Alpha X on Twitch and Twitter, AlphaXSC2, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.